Yo. They ain't got shit, G's. Over 2 years of waiting. For less than a minute. Oh my god, they legit got fucking nothing. Y'all know I expected it to be bad. You guys probably did too, but like, even I didn't expect this. This is seriously embarrassing, mortifying even. This gotta be one of the most pathetic I told you so moments in quite some time. I sincerely feel bad for anybody who's looking forward to these announcements. My god. Wow, so let's begin with a breakdown of what Square Enix generously referred to as announcements during their Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary stream. That's right, I hate to do it to you, but it's time to get deep inside. And whoa, they wasted no time as we are immediately treated to the stunning, completely unforeseen unveiling of a Steam version of Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1 Midgard Venture Integrate. That's right, they are once again asking you to buy Part 1. Hell of a way to kick this shit off, right? And in case anyone's not familiar with how PC game distribution works these days and you're wondering, what's the difference between the Steam version releasing tomorrow and the version released on the Epic Game Store last year that people have been playing already for over 6 months? Well, I'll tell you, none whatsoever. It's the same fucking game. The same files, the same everything. The only difference is what app you use to download it. But please, throw a fucking party about it, why don't you? Isn't Square Enix benevolent? Such a kind master. How understanding in temperament, how generous in bearing, how noble in stature. Gag me with a fucking spoon. And before anyone from the Square Enix social media response team hits me with, actually, now that it's on Steam, you can play it on Steam Deck. Dude, no shit. I'm not saying that it's not dope that you can now play a game that you like on your Steam Deck. Of course that's cool. I'm saying you shouldn't be thanking Square Enix for it. You should be giving them the middle finger and saying fuck you for paywalling this behind only one digital storefront in the first place. Jesus Christ. This kind of shit, telling people that they should be grateful for the opportunity to hand over even more of their money for something that shouldn't have even been paywalled in the first place, is the modus operandi of the entire gaming industry in our modern age. They want to slowly, over time, force you to lower your expectations of them, to shift the Overton window. And for anyone who's not aware, the phrase Overton window refers to the spectrum of acceptability, usually used in reference to government policies, but in this case referring to gaming industry behavior and practices. The less they give us as customers, and the more we tolerate it, the more it's normalized. The more the Overton window is shifted, and the more they're able to get away with insulting, disgusting bullshit like feeding you a $70 pile of excrement for the 4th time and telling you that you should like it. I'm sorry, Square Enix, but I do not like it. I will not buy it, and no one else should either. Next, if you can believe it, they actually tried to sell us a fucking clock shaped like a Buster Sword and some action figures. I'd honestly think this was an exercise in parody if I wasn't already so familiar with how shameless Square Enix is. Now, don't get it fucked up. If they want to sell a silly clock, some cloud toys, or a bracelet, or whatever the fuck, I honestly don't care. I'm sure there's people out there who like this stuff and would want to buy it. Cool, knock yourself out. I have 40k Funko Pops. I'm not judging. In fact, most people have dumb little trinkets and stuff like this they like to collect too. It's no big deal, nothing wrong with that. What I object to, however, is Square Enix using this barely 15-minute stream that's being rebroadcast by God knows how many people and media outlets that they spent the last week or so hyping up, that millions of fans are tuned into, all expecting some big announcement about the next FF7 games as just another vector to hawk their cheap cash grab merch. I mean, sure, you could make the argument that perhaps it was naive of me to assume that they wouldn't do something like that, but I don't think any of us could have predicted a plastic sword clock, okay? I mean, even for Square Enix, that's a little fucking extreme. And the thing is that y'all didn't even need to do this. Put out a press release, upload a separate announcement video, fucking tweet about it for all I care. Don't further abuse the trust of all the fans whose attention you know you have captive right now. That's fucking gross. I'd like to say that Square Enix is better than that, but we all know they fucking aren't. This is actually perfectly indicative of a modern day AAA game publisher taking a brief break from asking for your money to ask for more money. Wonderful stuff here, boys. Just really, this is going well so far. But okay, alright, maybe a cheap plastic clock shaped like a sword isn't enough to convince you to promise your firstborn to Square Enix. Not to worry, these next games are guaranteed to get you on your knees before your rightful corpo masters. Final Fantasy VII, The First Soldier. Or Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. I can't tell the difference. At this point, you may have found yourself wondering if maybe somehow you'd missed the release of a major Final Fantasy game. Don't worry, you're not alone. No, you haven't missed anything important, or good for that matter. This is actually a mobile game, or Season 3 of a mobile game, or a Butchered Chibi style FF7 mobile game. I'm not sure, it doesn't matter. They're both just microtransactions with the Final Fantasy VII skin. Hooray! Yep, that's right. They allotted barely 15 minutes for what's been laughably labeled a celebration and chose to dedicate over a quarter of that time to fucking mobile games. That's what they think of you, a loyal customer who's handed over God knows how much of your hard-earned money to Square Enix over the years. 15 minutes of announcements, 25% of which they chose to spend trying to sell you microtransactions on your cell phone. Awesome. We should have seen this coming, honestly, because again, as Square Enix themselves keep so helpfully reminding us, this is about them and making money. It's not about you or me or us and the games we like to play. It's about Square Enix and money. We're not even part of the conversation. Alright, next, after sitting through over 9 minutes of ads, we're finally rewarded with our first look at an actual game, and it's a fucking port of a PSP game from 14 years ago. Remember Crisis Core, boys? As I mentioned in the past, I hadn't played this game at all until very recently, and when I did, I played maybe 2 hours before I got bored. Now, I'm by no means passing judgment on it after such a short time with it, but from what I saw, I wasn't impressed. Plus, I think it bears mentioning that I got sick of it after barely 90 minutes. Looks like Square Enix has managed to force themselves to do the bare minimum though, as this appears to at least feature modern textures. It's hard to tell, but there may even be a full model and environment rework here as well. I'm not sure. It's kind of hard to believe they put in that much effort, to be honest. Maybe Square Enix was off their meds and feeling a little crazy. At any rate, put another cash-in remake/remaster on the board for these hack fucks, and what insult to injury would be complete without a nebulous release window as well. We've got one of those too, so you can look forward to paying Square Enix for this game a second time at some point this winter. Does that mean late November, mid-January, early March, 2022? 2023? See, I love this because it gives apologists an argument to hide behind so they can say, at least they announced a release date. No, they baited you with a release window that covers almost 4 months. I do like to be fair though, and in fairness, I do think it's pretty dope that they're putting this out on everything including PC and Switch. I like that. I'll definitely check it out on Switch. I'm not really excited about it and I certainly won't pay for it, but I will check it out. So there you go, Square Enix, that's me being nice. You better not try charging anything more than $40 for this though. Moving on, we now come to the star of the show, what Square Enix has chosen to dub Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Rather ominous moniker, wouldn't you say? Now, despite being the finale of this insulting orgy of aesthetic pandering, after almost 3 years, they couldn't even cobble together more than a single minute of game footage to show. Even less than that, actually, if we're only counting game footage and not flashy animations and vague but important sounding text. But I digress. Let's get into what brief bullshit they did manage to show. And we start off with some feathers floating over some dirt. Awesome. Along with a voiceover that, when translated from pedantic generic RPG speak, basically is saying, lols, this definitely isn't gonna be FF7, get fucked, nerd. Y'all remember the garbage bags from the end of Part 1 Midgard Venture, right? This is confirmation that they're definitely going to continue to be used as an excuse to further pervert, distort, disrupt, rewrite, and violate whatever is left of the Final Fantasy VII you love and remember. They literally say, focus on the future, not the past. Not very subtle, is it? We've then got a nice little animation, presumably from Deep Impact or Armageddon, of a meteor hitting Earth. Great, but not exactly gameplay, though I suppose it could be viewed as a sort of metaphor, the symbolic destruction of the original Final Fantasy in favor of this new fancy abomination or what have you. And then, at long last, 12 minutes and 28 seconds into a 15-minute video, we're finally permitted to feast our eyes on gameplay from Part 2. And this is what we get. Over 2 years of waiting and likely multiple payments of $70 later, your reward is a couple seconds of Cloud walking through some dirt. Going for a casual stroll alongside a character that at this point in the original game you shouldn't even know anything about. Fans of Part 1, is this what y'all were hoping for? Like, I'm being serious. Is this what you wanted? Is this doing it for you? Are you happy with this? Do you find this satisfying? Do you feel that this represents what you describe as Square Enix showing respect for your loyalty, time, and money? If your answer to any of those questions is yes, I'm not even mad, I just feel sorry for you. Y'all on a whole nother level Stockholm Syndrome. We're gonna need to come up with another expression. Anyways, a few more wasted seconds of flashing text and dramatic jump cuts later, we're then asked the question, what is Sephiroth's endgame? Ooh, motherfucker, you tell me. If I'm a newcomer to this game, I barely even know who that is at this point. A few more seconds of Cloud and Sephiroth walking follow, this time on some rocks and featuring a couple more leaves. Breathtaking. We've then got more video editor flexing, along with yet another insipid, practically non sequitur question. What is fact and fiction, for fuck's sake? Was this written by a 5th grader? Is this what counts as compelling writing at Square Enix these days? And now, after 29 seconds, we're already done with any gameplay, and now we're back to Dirt and Feathers, this time featuring Zack, another character whose presence means absolutely nothing to anyone not already intimately familiar with Final Fantasy. Not that it really matters, of course, as they're apparently doubling down on ensuring any resemblance to the original game is kept to an absolute minimum going forwards. And as anyone unfortunate enough to have played Part 1 Midgar Adventure knows, that's not because they have such a fascinating, compelling new story to tell that, by necessity, it must utterly obliterate the original Final Fantasy VII. No, it's because they needed a convenient excuse to not have to bother with creating an actual Final Fantasy VII remake, as they knew it would be hard to explain why that couldn't have been done in one part. But a version with a crazy new story that changes a bunch of wacky stuff in a new, totally insane and different way you've never heard of before? Well, that can be as long as they need it to be. Alternate dimension, timey-wimey nonsense and storytelling is the refuge of lazy writers and uninspired creators, or untalented ones, take your pick. We all know the original story, Mako, the Meteor, Jenova and Sephiroth soldier, blah blah blah. It's fine, it's cool, but it's not exactly fucking Shakespeare. I just don't think it was ever deep or compelling enough to warrant an Evangelion Rebuild-style full-scale reimagining, even a well-done one, which obviously this is not. It's just not that deep. Doesn't mean it's not good for what it is, just that there's not as much there as they want you to believe there is. But more importantly, I don't think that's what fans wanted. It's definitely not what I wanted. But as we've said time and time again, the Final Fantasy VII Remake project is not about what fans want, it's about what Square Enix wants. And what they want is a way to continue milking the cash cow that is the Final Fantasy VII brand. And as we all know, a single release, one-shot remake of the original would not have accomplished that, which is why we didn't get one. There is no other reason. Finally, as we begin to wrap up here, let's revisit my prediction video from the other day, just for a moment. Fortunately, though I hesitate to use that word to describe anything that we just watched, we did not get a live service. We did, however, get what I had described as the MCU method, in which they truncate the timetable for the whole project, cap the number of installments, and instead set us all up for a massively overpriced compilation purchase sometime after they're all released, likely taking more than 10 years. And for anyone who thinks that perhaps that's an uncharitable estimate, let's briefly recap the timeline and sequence of events here. The remake was first announced in 2015. Part 1, Midgar Adventure, covering barely the first 4 hours of the original, was not released until 5 years later, in spring of 2020. Following that, over 2 years elapsed before we heard anything about the next installment, during which Square Enix attempted to sell Part 1 back to us again no less than 4 times. Now, in June of 2022, they finally announced what will be the second of a total of 3 parts, which will not release until, at the earliest, over a full year from now, more likely early 2024. So, if we go with the currently established timeline, which, let's be honest, would be fucking generous to assume they'll be able to stick to that, we shouldn't expect the final part until, again, at the very earliest, 2028. That will mark almost 15 years after it was first announced and almost a decade after Part 1's release. Shit, we'll almost be due for another remake by then. Will there even be anything recognizable as Final Fantasy VII left at that point? For that matter, will there be anything recognizable left of Civilization at that point? I have no idea, but I doubt it'll be worth it to find out. Ugh. Alright, that's more than enough depression for one day, geez. We love you today. We love you all the way. What an absolutely fucking shameful display. I mean, holy fuck. I knew it was gonna be underwhelming. I'm not sure I actually thought it would be offensive too, but goddamn did they prove me wrong. Just think about what we saw today for a moment. This was the 25th anniversary. 25 fucking years of one of the most beloved games of all time, and Square Enix used it as an opportunity to not just continue to sell it back to you in barely recognizable parts, but to also sell you cheap plastic garbage and microtransactions. They had 15 minutes and spent less than 5 of them talking about actual games. Now, if that right there doesn't tell you all you need to know, you probably don't understand words. This is what you call a celebration? A fucking celebration? This was a Final Fantasy VII infomercial. We'll get you in the door with this fancy looking remake and then sell you a bunch of extra junk and predatory gimmicks for your phone once we got you. Absolutely disgusting. There's a famous William S. Burroughs quote, something about how modern day industry basically eats quality and shits out quantity, and Rarely have I seen a more prescient example of it than this catastrophe. Just for a second, spare a thought for all these amazingly talented artists, programmers, and musicians involved in all this who likely have a real genuine love for this stuff, being forced to just sit there and watch the bone-grinding machine called Square Enix devour all their hard work, only to shit it out in the form of cheap, soulless, assembly-lined products, utterly devoid of passion, creativity, or any genuine thought or care whatsoever. I don't know what you call this, because it sure as fuck isn't Final Fantasy VII anymore. What a goddamn tragedy.
Woke up, smoke up, blunt, then I pass out. Pass out. Woke up, what up, smoke up, blunt, then I'm back down. Back down. What? Woke up, smoke up, blunt, then I pass out. Pass out. Woke up, what up, smoke